Welcome to the Expert Network Team podcast,
where our goal is to inform and educate our listeners on matters related to finance, legal, insurance, accounting, and other interests that are of personal and business nature.
We hope you will find our content useful as well as entertaining. The Expert Network Team consists of Carl Frank of A&I Financial, Mike Miller of Miller and Associates CPAs, Jeff Kromendijk of Security First Insurance Agency, and I'm Nathan Merrill. I'm an attorney at Goodspeed & Merrill.
Together, our independent team combines our expertise to provide you insights and solutions, some straightforward, some profound, for real-life opportunities we see on a daily basis. We hope you enjoy the information contained in today's podcast and find it useful. If you'd like to learn more or desire to meet with any of the Expert Network team members in person, you can contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
We encourage you to take advantage of a free consultation with any of our team members. Just mention this podcast when you schedule your appointment.
Now on to today's podcast. Welcome to today's podcast. This is Nathan Merrill of Goodspeed Merrill. Glad to be with you today. And with me, I've got almost a full house here. I've got Carl Frank of A&I Wealth Management. I have got Jeff Kromendijk of One Digital Insurance. Did I get the right? I'm still getting used to the name changes. Everybody's changed their names, but we are. But and then our guest du jour today is Shawn Barbaras of More Than Money 360. Shawn, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Nathan.
And we're really excited for Shawn's contribution today. As you folks will recall, when we were discussing on the last podcast, we were discussing the book Die with Zero and some of the implications that has or presents in terms of what a legacy is, what it means. I had kind of coined the phrase when we were talking about how historically legacies were family assets like farms and businesses and that sort of thing. Nobody thinks of the family 401k as a legacy asset. So I think ultimately it boils down to what we think of in terms of leaving a legacy and how that legacy is represented among generations. And everybody has probably a different view in their heads of legacy. But Shawn, I'm going to lead in with this with you because I know this is a good portion of what you help families identify, but help us understand what legacy planning means and is and how it's accomplished.
Sure. So one thing legacy does not mean is anything quantitative. For us, it is purely qualitative. And in the most simplistic form, it is helping families identify the positive impact they want to have on their family, rising generations, their community, their church, causes that are important to them. And we focus on helping families identify what that positive impact is and sparking and managing those conversations so that everybody has an equal voice. One of the big mistakes of legacy in some of our research, 93% of the rising generation feel dictated to because G1 or G2 are the oldest generation is saying, hey, here's what we're going to do. Well, G3, G4 may say, we want to go a different route, and their voice is never heard. So the legacy fails. One of the first things you want to do with a family legacy, it gives everybody of appropriate age, whatever that may be for each family, is give them a seat at the table, give them a voice in the conversation to help have input and define what that positive impact is. But in its most simplistic term, it's a qualitative asset that defines the positive impact the family has on not only one another, their community, and causes that are important to them.
So I'm going to go back to this quantitative thing for a minute here, because I think that's going to be a paradigm shift for a lot of folks. And I know I've read some of your partners' books that are very interesting. They point out some interesting statistics, though, that I believe deal at some level with the quantitative side of the legacy, which is 70% of wealth transfers fail within one generation. I think it's 91% fail within two generations. And by third generation, 90% of all wealth transfers, the quantitative side.
97% after three generations, yeah.
Yeah. So, but that, to your point, I think that's where people tend to focus in terms of their legacy, what they're leaving behind. Can you speak to that?
Well, Sure, of course. I mean, I think you really have to look at what the definition of failure is when you see those high numbers, 91 and 97%. It's really three elements to it. One is the positive impact, the financial legacy of the family is slowly forgotten over the years. The financial wealth is in some way dissipated or completely gone. And then really what's worse to most families, if you look at the 9 personalities of the high net worth that Russ Allen Prince studied, the number one is family steward, 34.1%. The worst, the most devastating outcome of wealth transfer failure is the family unit fractures. Little Johnny's not talking to little Susie, either through miscommunication, no communication, or unfortunately litigation. So everything goes when the wealth transfer fails. It's not just the money. The family goes. The positive impact is forgotten. And you can look families all around their history, from the Vanderbilts on, that have failed, and certainly that can have a detrimental impact on the rising generations. And again, that's why so much what I talked about in the beginning is so critically important. Empowering the rising generation, engaging the rising generation, giving them a seat at the table and a voice.
So, Shawn, very interesting. And I'm just thinking about the differentiation between qualitative and quantitative. I think we all know the quantitative evaluation, but what are some of the characteristics that you've seen that would describe a good, healthy, qualitative definition of wealth transfer?
Sure. Well, the first thing that it takes is meaningful communication. Open, transparency, breach trust, families feeling free to bring up topics that may be taboo. You have to have that open communication. You have to have meaningful communication. I remember once talking to then a prospect, but now a client, and I said, do you have really meaningful conversations with your 3 children? He said, oh yeah, we talk about, I think he said the Cowboys. I think we talk about the Cowboys all the time. I said, no, that's not exactly what I'm talking about. What about the purpose of the wealth? What role would you like in the wealth? What would you like to see the wealth do? And having those conversations. So communication is the we refer to it as the lifeblood of a successful wealth transfer. If you're building a house, your core values are kind of the foundation. Your legacy is the first floor. Your philanthropy is the second floor. Your governance, the business of being a successful family, is the roof. But the communication, that's the wiring, that's the plumbing, that's the connectivity that keeps everything going. Everything else fails if there's not meaningful, open, respectful communication within the family. And that is clearly a qualitative asset. And what does that lead to? Even better family unity, right? Even maximizing shared impact. But it all starts with that meaningful communication. And if families don't have that can certainly lead to some trouble.
I'm really curious about that and how you facilitate that. And I think I heard you say earlier today that you're including those generations in the definition of what a legacy means to them. Did I understand you right there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're engaging typically. We let the family decide, obviously, but 13, 16 years old and up, and we give them a seat at the table for sure. This does not mean that they're making decisions about the family wealth. They're allowed to have a seat at the table to have a conversation about the purpose of the wealth, what they would like their role to be, what they would like to see the impact of the financial wealth to have on the family and the rising generations behind them.
And
absolutely.
Shawn, yeah. What are some of the examples that you're seeing in G4 and G3? I mean, generations that are down the road or younger than maybe somebody who's looking to plan a successful wealth transfer. What are some of these younger generations? How are they defining meaningful legacy, I guess?
Well, the Gen Z and the millennials are very purpose driven. Their mentality is, if I give $1 a day to something, it's going to move the needle. So they look at changing the world. They're very interested in making the world a better place. They're very philanthropic driven. Now, their interests are very different than their parents and grandparents. A lot of them are certainly interested in climate change. A lot of them are interested in inner city youth and things of that nature that may be different than their parents, who are very interested in giving money to their college or whatever it may be. So the philanthropic interests are very different, but the desire and the passion to make the world a better place, in my experience, is as strong, if not stronger, than the older generations. They're very purpose driven. When we look down to when I say look down, I mean in age, to the millennials and the Gen Zs coming up, but behind in the family for sure.
I'm curious, from your observations, from the work you do, the different challenges you face at the generational levels. You have the wealth creation generation we'll call G1, and then essentially the middle generation, the children at G2, and the grandchildren. What challenges or what obstacles are in the way from seeing a family through the process of effective communication?
Yeah, so we have a number in rising generations. One, and actually a family that you've introduced us to that we're working with, Nate, where someone in the rising generation says, money and family don't mix. We shouldn't be talking about this. Money's evil. I was always told money's the root of all evil. So we have some of those perceptions in the rising generation that we have to work around, and that's a process, not an event, but we get there. We certainly got there with that particular family, I believe, in that individual. And so they get to reposition what the impact that wealth can have, the positive impact that wealth can have. People have seen the negative impact wealth can have. We got entitled children, we have trust fund babies, we have young men and women that are spoiled or disincentivized, whatever it may be. A lot of us know the negative side of it, but highlighting that positive side and really addressing that. There's quite a few in the rising generations that believe in some way wealth and money are evil and can certainly cause a lot of damage. That is absolutely true. That's the reason why we do what we do, right? When you think about it, wealth can serve as a force of disunity and disagreement. Would you all agree with that?
It sure can.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And what families, the most successful families, if you read Dennis Jaffe's book, Borrowed from Our Grandchildren, 352 pages of genius, what those 100 families did over 3 generations or 100 years is they flipped it. They flipped the purpose of the wealth from being a source of disunity and disagreement to being a source of unity and empowerment for the rising generation. That takes communication. That takes identifying shared core values. That takes writing a family legacy mission statement. What's the positive impact we want to have? Identifying shared philanthropy, establishing governance parameters, the business of being a successful family constitution, advisory boards, who's going to sit in what seat, who's going to make what decision. How are we going to resolve disputes? This is all qualitative. You talked about the difference between quantitative and qualitative. This is all qualitative. And if you think about it, there's really 3 steps to wealth creation and transfer. Number 1, you have to create the wealth. Step 2, you have to sit down with Nate. You have to sit down with your financial planners. You have to sit down. You have to protect your assets. You have to mitigate taxes. You have to prepare. You have to prepare the money for the family. The problem is people stop after step 2. There's a 3rd step. You now have to prepare the family for the money. That is a qualitative process. And that's the 3rd step that people do not take. And that's why we have such a high rate of wealth transfer failure. If you look at some of the religions that are really focused on gratitude, their wealth transfer failure rate is much lower than the United States. Because we're a consumption country, right? We're an entitlement country. We're more materialistic. We're buyers. Whereas many religions are very focused on gratitude and wellness and mindfulness, and they have a much lower failure rate than we do here in the United States. And that's just mentality. That's it's accepting gratitude over entitlement. Sounds easy. It's not common in our country, unfortunately. We're fighting it, though. We're trying.
So want to tap into one of the things you've mentioned a couple of times as you rattle off the things that have to be addressed is the shared core values. Uh-huh. Can you speak a little bit about that, what that entails or how you get there? Because that's where, especially among 3 generation span, I don't know that there's any time uniqueness about time relative to values, but maybe you can speak to how you get people kind of identifying that they do have commonality in what they value and cherish.
Sure, absolutely. So as the 3 of you know, we have created a proprietary technology to help families prepare for and engage in qualitative family meetings. We have an entire project we call Values 360, and we complete 30-minute assessments with each family member each month in preparation for it. If you have an important meeting at work or church, you prepare for it. Well, family meetings are critical to multi-generational success. So we ask that each family member invest 30 minutes. I tell you all that because one of our assessments is just called individual core values. Which individual core values are most important to Nate or most important to Carl? And so that you can complete our, I believe it's 30 questions, and it'll create a pie chart that will identify for you what the most important core values are to you. Okay. Now, if you have 10 people in your family, 30 people in your family, 70 people in your family, we're built for these large families. Then we take each individual response, and our technology will take all of those responses, weigh them equally, and provide an aggregate output. So this say, okay, based on all your individual responses, here are the shared core values of the family. And we'll be at the family meeting. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it. No pride of authorship on our side. All we care about is that you're all sitting around this table about to communicate about it, right? So you have to give families that springboard in order to start the conversation. Well, I'm not so sure, that education is number one for us. I'm just picking any one of those 6 core values that we focus on. Well, why isn't it? Okay, great. Now we're having a conversation. We're having communication. Right? That lifeblood of the successful wealth transfer. And then those core values, as you identify and you agree upon those shared core values, that will be the basis for your family legacy mission statement. And then we have a system and a process that we help families start to write their family legacy mission statement. And then that rolls into philanthropy, and then we're rolling in the governance thereafter. So core values, like I talked about before, it's the foundation of the house. And that's where outside of communication, we usually start with most of our families around communication, but outside of after communication, core values is usually a logical next step for that exact reason.
Well, it's fascinating. I'm just intrigued. I think, as being a business owner, and certainly we've built successful businesses, this is stuff that we, really end up landing on once we're off the treadmill and kind of really, looking towards building something that's going to, go well into the future with or without us. And, this is all stuff that we've worked on, with regards to core values and mission and vision. I just love the idea of doing that as a family, whether I've got any wealth to transfer or not. I think it'd just be really great to have these conversations, with our kids so that we're all aligned with regards to what we're about, what we stand for, and the kind of impact we want to make on this world.
You don't have to be wealthy to believe your net worth is more than your financial balance sheet, that all these qualitative assets are of value. It's just that the higher your net worth, the more you have at risk and the more you have to lose, per se.
Exactly.
But you don't need to be wealthy to believe that your net worth is more than money. Not at all. Most people do. But how? One of the things we talk all the time is legacy is often discussed yet rarely acted upon. Roy Williams, one of the godfathers in this industry, Institute for Preparing Heirs, he was, I don't want to say a mentor of mine, but him and I would talk every month for about an hour prior to his wife getting sick and ultimately his passing. And, he was in his 70s, said, Shawn, you're the future. Don't stop. I'm too late to change my spots. But this is what we need to be doing because legacy is often discussed yet rarely acted upon. If I see another Lincoln Financial commercial about legacy that is talking about money, I'm going to cry. That's not at all. That's bastardizing the term legacy. But you ask yourself, legacy is often discussed, rarely acted upon. Why? Because of system, the lack of system, process, to be able to engage families to have this qualitative conversation. And that's the mission we are on as a company at More Than Money 360, is to empower and partner with as many advisors who believe in this concept of what we call more than money, to help their most successful families maximize positive impact, strengthen family unity, elevate intentionality, so forth and so on, to be able to act upon legacy, not just talk about it, but do something about it. And that's really that's really our mission that we're on here and have been on since 2007.
Yeah, I hope our listeners heard that. I think that's just so important. I think oftentimes if, a listener, tunes into one of our podcasts and, within the first 5 minutes, they might feel like, well, this doesn't apply to me. And I think when we talk about leaving a legacy, we immediately go to the quantitative side of it. It's the wills that we're, putting together so that we can, in an effective way transfer, I guess, our wealth, our monetary wealth. But I love what you just said, Shawn. This is for everybody. And to actually take a family unit, have good, healthy conversation, create common core values, family mission statement. I mean, this is powerful, powerful stuff. And I'm just so glad you brought that up. I mean, I came into this time today thinking, it was all going to be about wealth transfer, quantitative. But this quality aspect of it is just fascinating. I want to thank you personally for bringing me down this road. This is awesome. I'm excited and very intrigued.
That's great. Well, thank you. That's what we're trying to do as a company, and that's what we'll continue to try to do till the good Lord takes me.
Amen.
I think I want to tee up, close out this particular discussion and maybe tee up a second discussion for another podcast with you, Shawn, which is obviously, I mean, you came on the scene in the 2010s in terms of your company and your technology. I'd like to understand a little bit of the history to this area of practice, some of the research and the things you learned as you created the offering that you have. I'd love to hear that from you in the next podcast, because I can't imagine that I mean, maybe it was just accidental, but how did families address this in the past? I know from some of reading that you and I both have done relative to James Hughes in his books, that he identifies tribes and clans that have subsisted over centuries and millennia with the same principles that I think you kind of try to help families integrate into their minds and their relationships. But I can't help but think of one of the most modern reflections of this is the Native American community, who, even without wealth to transfer from generation to generation necessarily, they have transferred a legacy through their oral histories, through their traditions and that sort of things. You mentioned religions in some previous discussion, but I think that has a lot to do with how historically this has been done. And now we're trying to put a little more systems, like you say. I think you're putting systems to what has historically been kind of an organic thing. So, but really, really appreciate having you here with us today. And so as to preserve all that conversation for another podcast, I'm gonna have us sign off here. Carl, Jeff, any closing thoughts?
I'm really looking forward to it, Shawn. This has been great. Thank you for a pleasant surprise. We're having a great time.
Thank you for having me. Greatly appreciate it, gentlemen. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Shawn.
Great, beautiful day. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the information we shared.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to share it with someone else, and join us next time.
If you want to meet with a member of the team, please contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
If you have special topics you'd like to hear about, please reach out to us and let us know at the same email address. Again, that's info@expertnetworkteam.com. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We want to remind you that listening to this podcast does not establish a client-professional relationship with any of the firms represented, nor does it constitute legal, investment, or accounting advice, and the views are those of the professionals only.
Investment advisory services may be provided through A&I Financial Services, and securities may be provided through Genios Wealth Management.